Hello, my name is Dr. Bello Ahmed, and I would like to just give a brief on the contentious tax reform bill that has caused so much commotion in Nigeria. The tax reform bill, is a package of 4 bills: the Nigerian tax bill, the Nigerian tax administration bill, the Nigerian Revenue Service Establishment Bill, and then the Nigeria Revenue Board Establishment Bill. Now, these 4 bills have their various reforms, of which some of them are advantageous and some, of course, at the disadvantaged side. Now, but out of these 4 bills, the most contentious ones are the first 2, which is the Nigerian tax bill and the Nigerian tax administration bill, because they are the ones that directly concern VAT, that is value added tax. Now, value added tax is a general consumption tax, and in Nigeria for now, in the reform bill, it is viewed as a progressive tax because the threshold was first raised before 2020. The VAT was 5% in Nigeria. Now, the Finance Act of 2020 raised that threshold to 7.5%, and then in this new reform, it will be raised next year to 10%, and then between 2026 and 2029, it will be raised again to 12.5%, and then in 2030, it will be raised to 15%. And by definition, since it's progressive, it doesn't stop there. Now, this has direct implication on the cost of goods and services, because VAT is a tax that is imposed of goods and services, and then the end user, the final consumer, bears the burden of that tax. If any tax that is imposed, if it is an indirect tax like VAT, then if it is imposed on the producer or on the goods and services, now the producer will transfer the burden to the final consumer. That's why it's a very serious issue that can affect the prices of goods and services, especially given the inflationary atmosphere in the country, where we have crazy inflation that has become so volatile, so these tax issues are very critical to the prices of goods and services in the country. Now, what is the trouble in this tax reform? Now, the areas of trouble are in the vertical and horizontal sharing formulas of VAT. In the status quo, the vertical sharing formula is how it is shared between federal, states, and LGAs, that's the 3 tiers of government. And the horizontal sharing formula is how the state and FCT share, is shared. Now, in both cases, there are going to be changes. For example, in the vertical sharing formula, the status quo is the federal state takes 15%, the state 50%, and the LGAs take 35%. But in the reform, the federal will concede is 5%, it will step down to 10%, and then that of the share of states will be raised to 55%, and then that of local government remains as it is, 35%. Now, the horizontal sharing formula currently is the share of how the 50% of state is shared. Now, how it is shared is 50% based on equality, 30% based on population, and 20% based on derivation. Now, the word derivation has not been clearly defined in both the VAT Act of 27 or neither in the Finance Act of 2020. But practically, derivation is viewed as the state of remittance. That's where the head offices of major companies are located, and where that's the point, the hub where VAT is remitted. So, by implication, Lagos and Oyo states have the advantage because most, and River states, Delta, they have this advantage because most of the head offices are located in these 5 states, including the FCT. But the major beneficiary here is Lagos State. So if it is viewed as in terms of it's a game of strategy. You find that the winners are about 5 states, which is Lagos, Oyo State, Port Harcourt, FCT, and Delta. Now, in the new horizontal sharing formula, that's where the area of contention is, because in the new there you find that the share of states has been raised to 55%, but the horizontal sharing formula will be 50 instead of 50% based on equality. Now equality takes 20%, and instead of 30% based on population takes 20%, and then derivation, which initially used to be 20%, is now going to be raised to 60%. Now, if you look at it, VAT is, contributes more to FAC allocation than any other, source of revenue. For us, it contributes about 600 billion, I think, in the last, in somewhere around August this year. So you find that the chunk of, revenue to all states and LGAs come from VAT. That is why everybody is interested in the sharing formula of VAT. Like I said, it's going to be progressive. Therefore, it has implication on cost of prices between now and 2030, meaning that this persistent rise in prices, this inflationary pressure in the country may not necessarily, douse down, except if by some, if the government reversed some of its policies that have already pushed prices to that level. And another issue that is contentious, is troublesome in this new reform bill, is the plan to, to scrape some vital institutions that are critical to education in the country, which is under what they call development levy. Development levy, some part of the profits of companies that are allocated to specific institutions, for example, Tech Fund, NIDA, NASENI, which is the Nigerian Nigerian Agency for Science and Engineering Infrastructure. Okay, all of them get certain percentage from this development levy. Okay, for example, Tech Fund gets about 3% from the profit of companies. NIDA gets about 1% from the telecom and other allied industries in those area of ICT. And then the NASANI gets also some slash from that development levies. Now, the contribution given to this, the funds given to this 3 vital institutions is going to be retrogressive, regressively, if you like, reduced to 0 by 2030, such that all that should be accrued to them will now go to NEL Fund. That's the National Education Loan Fund. It will move there, and then the government has not given its stand as to the position of these 3 institutions after 2030. For instance, if you go to higher institutions in Nigeria, universities, polytechnics, and colleges, you find that almost 90% of their infrastructure and staff development funds come from TED Fund. Sponsorship for higher degrees, masters, PhDs, home and abroad are sponsored by TED Fund. Conferences, researches, IBR, all this, the usage of these institutions, if you go to, cannot be overemphasized. If you check, NIDA has done a lot in terms of awareness, trainings, provisions of computers and infrastructure in the nooks and crannies of the 774 local governments, if you like, in the country. Most higher institutions and places, strategic places, you will see the presence of NIDA. Also, NASANI has done a lot in terms of science and engineering infrastructure in the country. Now, these are some of the effective institutions of government, even though we have seen a lot of MDAs consumed with corruption, high-level corruption and inefficiencies and ineffectiveness. But these three, at least, you can judge that you have seen part of their, achievements. They are obvious. So why would the student loan be more emphasized than these three, very effective institutions? Only the government can explain that. So these are the major issues concerning this reform. Of course, there are advantages and disadvantages. There are areas that can be beneficial. For instance, there are tax waivers and tax holidays, tax waivers to different segments of the society. For example, those that are earning less than 800,000 as their annual, salary will be exempted. Businesses that have, their stake not more than 50 million or below 50 million will be exempted. Things like that. There are issues that are good, that will be useful to the society. But of course, I think there are a lot of issues that, the advantage, the disadvantage possibly could outweigh the advantage if care is not taken. So we suggest that the government should revisit this reform and emphasize humanity into it, inject humanity into it, look at the present situation Nigerians are. People cannot even afford what they can eat. Food has become so costly, and food is the first basic necessity of life. Of course, there are other underlying, consumer goods that are necessary for usage at homes and places of work, cost of transportation. So I think it's better for the government to review it, to revisit it, and members of National Assembly, they should remember that they are representing the generality of Nigerians that are voiceless, and life should be made simpler. The welfare of Nigerians should be paramount. Thank you so much.